is it possible that they are preparing us for something that they know is on the horizon, and they're doing it slowly, right? By introducing new terms into our conversations, getting everyone comfortable enough to say, okay, listen, there is a there. We might not have the ability to quantify it, but something is out there. One of the theories that Lou Elizondo recently proposed was that if and when we have witnessed this phenomenon, UAP and occupants, that they were actually scouting our planes and just kind of seeing what our abilities are. And he said that this is a common practice among armies before they actually invade.
Hey everybody, I'm Rex Bear. How the heck are you? Beautiful day today out here in Southern Colorado. As you can see behind me, we got a few demons hanging out with us because who do we have on the show? Nathaniel J. Gillis, one of the top demonologists on the planet. Real quick, want to get away? Remember that commercial? Anyway, so I think about that because I got into podcasting full time about 8 years ago. I mean, I've been doing podcasts longer than that, but I actually broke out of the rat race about 8 years ago, working for the man, and started doing what I love to do. I have a lot of people ask me how I got into it and what is my secret to success. And I say, hey, look, you got to love what you do. You got to wake up every day with passion, because if you love what you do, it's not really work. But also you got to have some tricks and tools of the trade, especially in today's day and age with all the competition that's out there, to really set yourself apart. So Jay Matta, he's the founder of Gnostic TV. It's an awesome platform. You should definitely check it out. He's also had very successful businesses in insurance and lending. And now he's doing Gnostic TV. How cool is that? He lives in Florida. Well, we put together this 4-week online course to give you the tools of the trade to help you build your podcast, your social media empire, how to interact with your community, how to build the right thumbnails and hashtags, etc. So send me an email if you're interested, bigproject@gmail.com. We've only got a couple of spots left for this first event, or for the first course. We will have courses in the future, but if you want to be a part of the first course, definitely send me an email sooner than later. We'll talk a little bit beforehand just to make sure it's a good fit for all of us, because we want you to get the best and most value and have some fun with it. Do what you love to do. Make money for your voice. And let's get back to the podcast right now. Hello. Nanu. How does it feel to treat me like you do? I'm listening to New Order right now, Blue Monday. This is perfect, right? Perfect song to listen to while I'm sharing with you how to become a social media rock star. I'm not even wearing pants.
Yes.
You have people from around the world, Nathaniel, sending you plane tickets saying, hey, come out and check this. We need your expert advice. And I think that's really cool. Didn't you just get back from the UK a few months ago from a conference or something?
Yes, sir. A few months ago, I was blessed to attend the Awakening Mini Expo in Manchester, UK, with Steve Mera, Barry Fitzgerald, the Kinsella brothers, my good friend Paul St. Clair, and then, of course, Mark Ollie. It's fascinating time. We cover the dark side of ufology. And I do believe right now, if you go to UAMN TV on their YouTube channel, you can find yours truly giving the lecture, which was the Multers, the host, the hybrid, and the copy. And I talk about hybridization, and I kind of draw a line in the sand and say that it's possible that the hybrid, the avatar itself, is a different species than the consciousness that's possessing it. So even if it may look alien to us as a hybrid, we truly don't know what intelligence is hiding behind the eyes. And so that's on UAMN TV. Had a blast. Steve Mera, Barry Fitzgerald, Paul St. Clair, they're all, in my opinion, they're all at the top of their field. And so Paul St. Clair's field, I think it's cryptozoology. Dr. Fitzgerald and Steve Mera's is parapsychology. And then there's a new word that's being introduced, phenomenology. And so you combine that with what I'm into, and it was just a fascinating conference. I was very blessed.
Okay, so this is really interesting how if we look at the UFO phenomena, UAPs especially, over the past 8 years, it's really shifted in the news, right? It
Mhm.
was before mainly alternative media. It was mainly people that were talking on YouTube or various platforms, Blog Talk TV or Blog Talk
Mhm.
Radio, if you remember that, before YouTube was even very big. We're going way back, folks. But there was a time when, if you were talking about UFOs and ETs, it was
Mhm.
more in the conspiratorial realms.
Right.
And for the past 8 years, the ET phenomena has taken the media by storm. And you have universities now, professors writing papers about the extraterrestrial phenomena, the possibility
Mhm.
that they're visiting us and that they've sent micro drones already. And I
Mhm.
find that pretty remarkable. And I did some research into that and found some private organizations linked with military and Department of Defense. They established some type of a group. How do I put this? Basically, a trend in social media as well
Mhm.
as regular media, just like television shows, etc., as well as universities, in a change of tune. Meaning,
Right.
okay, we're going to talk about ETs now. We're going to talk about extraterrestrials, and we're going to look at it like it's real, like it's a real phenomenon. And the
Mhm.
Space Force and Oumuamua, the Tic Tacs, all this stuff seems to be released at certain times, and it's creating this outline for acceptance of extraterrestrials, in my opinion.
Mhm.
And what I find even more, just as fascinating, a part of this, just recently, there was a huge, it's called the MCCS, MajorCitiesChiefs.com. If you've heard of MajorCitiesChiefs.com, it
Mhm.
is basically the top brass in law enforcement, international organization, and
Mhm.
they get together and look for ways to make new policies and change, etc. Well, in their most recent get together, Nathaniel, this is a
Mhm.
pretty big deal here. Check out this reference guide. It's a
What?
UAP reference guide for the
Incredible.
Major Cities Chiefs Association. Section 2 is all about law enforcement. So, law enforcement obviously being on the front lines, oftentimes, right,
Mhm.
of these
Mhm.
phenomena. Well, now this is talking about the unknown threat to public safety, aviation safety, UAP related calls for service, and how law enforcement should consider responding to UAPs. So this is absolutely mainstream now. What I find
Oh yeah.
yeah, I mean, right? It's like, okay, here it is. This is going out into the world now. So do you think there's going to be a big shift, or do you think there's going to be something that takes place maybe within the next 5 to 7 years where they make themselves known to the point where it's like almost playing catch up with the
No.
media?
Yeah. I think so. I mean, there's obviously a concerted effort within our government to obfuscate the subject. I mean, look at Lou Elizondo. I know everybody has their own, concerns and reservations about certain researchers and whistleblowers, but he's come out and said, "Listen, we have them in 4K. We have photographs and video evidence of craft rather, not crafts, but craft with occupants in them." And so there has been this it's an incredible movement right now from our government to basically stop disclosure from happening. And then now what we're seeing is slowly but surely it's leaking out to the public. And right, well, look what you just posted. This is starting to become a part of common parlance. This is going to be a household name UAP here. And the question that I and others have been asking as of late is, okay, why now? Is it possible that they are preparing us for something that they know is on the horizon, and they're doing it slowly, right? By introducing new terms into our conversations, getting everyone comfortable enough to say, okay, listen, there is a there. We might not have the ability to quantify it, but something is out there. One of the theories that Lou Elizondo recently proposed was that if and when we have witnessed this phenomenon, UAP and occupants, that they were actually scouting our planes and just kind of seeing what our abilities are. And he said that this is a common practice among armies before they actually invade. Now, again, I'm not saying this is not Nathaniel Gillis saying this. This is in his book, Imminent. So I have it right in front of me, not behind me. So I would encourage everybody to buy it because he does cover a series of topics that are germane to the conversation. But where we're at right now, my friend, is we're just now starting to understand how capable this phenomenon is. What can it do? Are there any limitations? I was on a show the other day, and I've been hitting this point hard because a lot of people, it goes over their head or they're not really comprehending what I'm saying. This phenomenon can create physiological constructs where we are living our day-to-day lives, making eye contact with the proto-intelligence, and it's blending in our reality, looking at us, communicating, interfacing. In we're thinking, okay, this is just a plane, or that's just a person, or that's a building. And so again, in order to quantify it empirically, we have to have an understanding of at least some limitation. Right now, there isn't any. I mean, talking about the actual proto-intelligence behind it, there's very little that it cannot do.
Last time we talked, you were saying that the research has led you to believe that there could be just one source that is creating pretty much all the paranormal activity that people see, genuine paranormal activity, right, as like dark sorcery type stuff, as well as other aspects, not dark as well, right?
Yeah, there's an esoteric value through and through. And I think that, like any species, it can be symbiotic and then it can turn parasitic like that. It's all about what it intends to do. But there is sorcery involved. I mean, some of the research I've been doing as of late is centered around the incubus as a practitioner, not just as an entity self-replicating through a woman, but literally as a practitioner of magic or sorcery. And this, I can go through another lecture on that, or even do a lecture series. But my point being that the esoteric value within the phenomenon is not a bug, it's a feature. It's something that is built in, baked into its existence. And we can separate the two and say, okay, some's dark, some's light, some's white, some's black. That's irrelevant to me. The point is, right, that there is something to do with consciousness, the spirit. And then on the flip side of that coin, you have technology that's present. And it goes back to one of Eliphas Levi's greatest quotes, was that we have materialized spirit. Now we need to spiritualize matter. And that encapsulates where we are right now. Because it's a duality, not a dichotomy. It's spirituality, consciousness, and technology. And what would we call that? We would call that somewhat like an AI.
Singularity, well, not necessarily singularity, but transhumanism almost is what I think of. You think that all the, now your ET thought is that all ET experiencers are under the same proto-intelligence?
At least the ones I've worked with. I mean, I've had cases where people have been working with guides. Matter of fact, I know of one individual, but on show, worked with a guide who he thought, okay, this guide has all the best intentions for me. And he had this psychic ability that he's going through his life and helping people with. When he started to remember his abductions, he went back to the same guides for answers to his questions. They're non-existent. What does that imply? It implies that there are a series of programs the phenomenon brings the experiencer through. And at any time, again, I've stressed this over and over again, at any time, that archetype that it's incarnating as, it'll lean into it, lean out of it. But at any time, the proto-intelligence behind it can step out of that model, step out of demonology, right? Step out of the ETH, out of hauntology. And now what you're dealing with is a phenomenon that has diversified its identity so as to evade us as a species. So how do what was the first evidence I've collected that points to that? Well, we would have to go back to antiquity, right? Where we would go to the Rephium, which, we've talked about that in depth before. But my point here is that our ancestors did not separate gods in cosmology with demons here locally. What they believed was if they did not give them offerings, the same phenomenon they were ministering to and for would change hands, would change archetypes, and now would malevolently haunt them in their homes. So they didn't diversify. It was one and the same to them. It was just different incarnations of different archetypes. And so what I've been doing as of late is I've actively deconstructed the phenomenon and the archetypes it's leading into. Like, okay, for instance, demonology is just another archetype the phenomenon manifests as to hide from us. And with that archetype, even the guide, right, there are rules that follow that model. But the proto-intelligence behind it, it just wears it as a mask. It follows none of those rules whatsoever. So this is why when people say, okay, I went to a malevolent haunting and it looked malevolent, it looked like a demonic entity. And then a priest comes, I know a particular individual that told me this is fascinating. He's on an investigation. He says, okay, the priest brought a vial of holy water because it's a demon, right? That's what it appeared as. That's the archetype. And so he takes the vial of water, puts it in the most haunted room in that investigation, and they're watching this intelligence siphon that water all the way down to nothing. So what we see now are conflicting manifestations. At first blush, it leads us into this gloomy labyrinth of deception. Oh, it's a demon. And then when we respond to it in terms of, okay, if you're the demonic, we're going to employ this ritual, then you see the proto-intelligence transcend it. So what it appears as, it's a systemic program. And it's almost designed, again, it's very much like artificial intelligence and ChatGPT, because it's designed to facilitate triggered responses within the experiencer. Right? Okay, I'm going to manifest as this. Why? Because when I do, you're going to respond this way. And so we're looking at this through our eyes saying, okay, it's all about their manifestation. No, it's not. It's all about our responses to the manifestation. That's what they're doing. And so this is why when they manifest as the archetype of the guide, okay, I'm going to put absolute trust in you. Now, should I? Probably not really. Because again, it's not just the mask, it's the eyes, the consciousness staring through it that we are truly communicating with.
What do you think it is?
I think it's almost like a cryptid consciousness. The amount of control it has over our species is astounding. I mean, the only way I could explain the access it has to us is if some of us are actually avatars to its consciousness. And what we're witnessing, especially within the abduction syndrome, it's a lot like Westworld. It's a lot like The Matrix, wherein the experiencer is being fixed, or something within them that they're ignorant of is being tuned. And they're thinking it's them. It's not. It's something that they've put in that experiencer. And I say that because not just because of the way that they have access to our species, but when they're walking through walls and literally putting entire families in suspended animation, it speaks to a presence that's much more local, and it may even be consciousness based, to where consciousness itself may be the parasitic entity, and we're not. I don't know. I'm throwing that out there. That's a whole other show. But yeah, so I would suggest
no. That's a big deal. Let's talk about that for a minute. Go back to that, because I think that's important.
Yeah.
Explain that a little bit, please.
Yeah. So in my lecture at The Awakening, I talked about the host and the hybrid, and how one of Dr. Carla Turner's experiencers was told in no uncertain terms. There are some people where the consciousness that is possessing them is a different species than they are, to where it's a subspecies. And so this would explain in great detail, from my perspective, well, how it is that when that phenomenon interacts with certain people, it's almost like there is a battle for memory. They've even been told, okay, we're doing this for you or to you, but not for you. And so they go home and the avatars try to remember what was done to something else inside of them. and there's this war. And that would also explain, like I said before, how easy it is for them to literally not just missing time, but an uninterrupted stream of consciousness within the avatar's mind. Right? I had one case where a guy's reading the book. He looks up. It's like 11:30 at night. He looks back down at the book. Looks back up. It's 3 in the morning. Why? The avatar is not realizing what's happening, but something inside is, and this whatever I think is from them. I think that they have created a species to use as avatars. Matter of fact, in Lou Alzano's book Imminent, he discusses this, where, and if you guys haven't read it, it's been out long enough, so it shouldn't be a spoiler. But he talks about how that one of the bodies that we've collected, that our government has collected, upon doing an autopsy, that it lacked the intellectual faculties to actually design and create the craft it was piloting. Avatars. And the problem we're having now is, again, we can look at the material image of the avatar and think that is what the consciousness looks like inside of it, right? That's long been a theory of mine, right? Okay, yeah, they're right, but that isn't necessarily true. I mean, right? It could create an extraterrestrial avatar and be something much more local to our species. And so this is why it's nearly impossible to vet. But I think that's the whole point of it all, right? The phenomenon evolving according to our awareness of it. We've poked through the hole, poked through the veil of the guide. We now know that all guides are not good guides. Now we've done it with the demonic. Now they're giving us a new archetype, which is the extraterrestrial, one that is not easily vetted, one that the only way we could vet is by virtue of phenomenon. And so what I'm looking for, again, here, it is a symbiotic and parasitic consciousness that, regardless of what the consciousness looks like, it is still self-replicating through our species. And I don't want to ramble, but that's primarily where I'm at.
You're not rambling. I'm taking notes as you're talking. The consciousness thing. So this proto-intelligence that you described. Do you have any information or data that suggests there's a group or a council behind it, or is it? Is it?
Oh my God! Well, what I could tell you is this: it wasn't just on the part of our species that the phenomenon was diversified. Hauntology, demonology, the whole gamut. The phenomenon leaned into that and wanted us to believe that demonology and hauntology were separate. And this was done throughout history. And so in doing that, though, there was a program in place to cause us to believe that. In one of those was, again, the creation of physiological constructs to call, oh, well, I saw horns and hooves. A demonologist told me that one time. I saw horns and hooves. I was like, okay, is that an actual demonic entity? And when you get back through history, this is fascinating to me. This is when I realized, oh my God, I know what it's doing. It was running a program. It was not, see, again, that was not really tied to any historical record, Rex. But within Western population, in Western scholarship, that's what the average person in a home would believe a demon was, regardless of the historicity. And so when you have that kind of program running, you realize if this is indeed what it says it is, it would hold to the actual historical record. It wouldn't just fabricate an archetype and then voila, here I am. And so a lot of these, and people say that, okay, Nathaniel, I'm sure you've heard this too, where, demons are a social construct. Absolutely. But there are physiological constructs first. And what I'm talking about, quite literally, is the same phenomenon we're witnessing on Skinwalker Ranch, right? Where, okay, if the researchers get too close, it will manifest a cryptid. The hitchhiker effect. In our minds, right? Oh my God, cryptozoology and the Skinwalker Ranch, they're completely separate aspects of the field, and they weren't. The cryptid itself was the weaponization of an archetype on the part of the phenomenon to push us back, or to at least modify our behavior. And this is exactly what the ancient texts speak of when they're in terms of gods and deities, where if you do not, if you get too close to the veil, if you make too much eye contact for too long of a time, this phenomenon has the ability to weaponize entire archetypes to modify our behavior, to keep us in line. And so, in light of that evidence, in light of that information, and by the way, for future reference, for those who are watching, I'm talking about Axelrod at Skinwalker Ranch when he was investigating from the Pentagon. Next thing you know, he gets a phone call from his wife. There's a wolfman outside. So yes, what we're realizing now, as much as people are going to freak out, is that a lot of this is calcified in mythopoeic thought and mythology, to where this intelligence has authored its own mythology, Rex. And we're thinking cryptid and ghost. If it can create physiological constructs, it could simply be one proto-intelligence behind it all. And what it was doing, it was monitoring our behavior, modifying our perception of it, and using mental warfare to create and control our species.
See, this is interesting because when you talk about Luis Elizondo, he was actually referenced in this reference guide, this UAP reference guide that was handed out at the Major Cities Chiefs Association. And when you say that he describes these beings with 4K, and ships, etc., that to me sounds like it's an actual being, not a proto-intelligence that is manifesting an archetype. Like it's somebody from somewhere, whether or not they're from some other dimension or another planet or whatever, I clearly don't know, but that seems different than this proto-intelligence. So to me, it appears that yes, there is this proto-intelligence that you describe that is equally fascinating and frightening. And also there's other beings out there and other species and civilizations from other planets. Right. The question is, are they affected by this as well?
Well, and this gets in a very peculiar position. The deepest, I guess, research right now in the field, from my perspective, is not just the study of consciousness, the origin and nature of consciousness, but are these things even real? And I'm not questioning, again, down crap. That's not my point. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that 10 minutes from my house right now in Dayton, Ohio, there's the Wright Pat Air Force Base. And in their rituals, they were altering states of their own consciousness, their consciousness. And then through the altering of their consciousness, the phenomenon partially manifested technology. So what I am literally talking about is something you can touch, taste, hear, smell, immediately accessible to all senses, documented, and then you can close your eyes, open them, and it's gone. Gone. There's a man that I know right now who is in parapsychology, who had studied a cluster of trees. It had paranormal activity surrounding them, a cluster of trees, documented them. They're present. He's taken photographs, everything. Comes the next day, they're gone. So when we're talking about, well, if they're aliens and they're going to invade, no, if this is a parasitic presence or a parasitic consciousness, it's invaded reality. It has invaded reality. And this, again, the dichotomy and the paradox that we're in right now is, are they real? Yes, until they're not. Until they choose not to be. And this has been the same through hauntings, the same through apports. Let me get onto apports real quick. This is more like a program or a simulated reality at some points. The apports that the phenomenon is taking, they are replacing them with what are called simulants. Objects that look the part, but are not, in fact, the actual object. This is, again, if you guys want to reference, I would refer you guys to Dr. Barry Fitzgerald and Steve Mera Project Doorway. But they discovered that that's the case, that they had a mug that went missing. And so they had another mug that came with it. Next thing you know, the mug that was taken is manifested in the house. Like, we've checked that spot for a long time. It's not been there. We can't figure it out. So they ran tests on it. It was different than the mug they took. Guys, it was different than the coffee mug they took. Do we realize this? Because the weight of that profundity, that means that it can take something and replace that something with someone. Or it could take someone and replace that someone with a something. And it has the intellectual intent to steal and replace with such a likeness so as to not disturb our interpretation of reality. Meanwhile, this is what has scared me to death, is that we have been so focused, hyper-focused even on the paranormal being paranormal. That's because we only recognize what's paranormal. What about the paranormal that's present? And we've seen it, made eye contact with it, talked to it. And that is the phenomenon. This gets back to some of Nick Redfern's research when I believe somebody had asked him, what do you think some of these men in black were, right? They're knocking on doors in World War I and World War II. Who were they? And they go, okay, yeah, well, some of that is the phenomenon. What? Yes. Physiological constructs. Okay, literally, like you're talking to someone. You're thinking, okay, everything's fine. And that person is a construct of this intelligence. I had a friend. I mean, we're seeing this again as it's not just a cultural artifact. This is a symbiotic characteristic throughout the entire phenomenon. And my point here is, okay, how many times have we stepped into a haunting, saw an apparition, thinking it's a ghost? It's been this. In the hub, I think that would kind of punctuate this paradigm is the Skinwalker Ranch. They had everything. Why? Because it was one. Everything was one. One was everything. And depending on the person, it would determine, like, okay, if it's a demonologist, okay, I'll be a demon to you. Why? Because I'm projecting that archetype. Now, the purpose of this is so that you believe I follow by the archetypal rules. And then again, by the time we entertain it and make eye contact with whatever's behind the veil, it's more like a program, and it works programs on us.
So I have friends that have had experiences with what most people would probably call the grays.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that these people are genuine when they talk to me off air about their testimonies, and I watch their emotions and their body language and just the way that they respond to what has happened to them. And one person in particular has had very high level positions with technology, and he has gone from thinking that they're aliens to not necessarily sure what they are. But if something can go in and out through a wall, you could look at it, as you say, such as like this intelligence that can morph and change, and it's just one intelligence, one consciousness. And there's also technologies that we are seeing now that if we looked at 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, we would think that they were alien technologies or paranormal technologies. Right. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are civilizations, even maybe our own civilization, defense contractors working in laboratories that are outside of the government, where they could go through a wall. And when my one friend in particular that has told me many of these times, these things come into his room and they vibrate into his room and they appear. And he's told me, he said, hey, you can grab them. He says, you can absolutely grab them when they're there. He's also mentioned before that he's not Christian, but when he says, because he's been so scared, he's tried everything, and he's said, leave in the name of Jesus or something along those lines. I'll get the exact verbiage, but he said that worked. And I've talked to other people that have made those claims that I don't necessarily know, like that I may not trust as much, but I trust this person in particular big time, like what he's telling me. So my point is it because they're calling out and using the word Jesus? Is it because of this, super being Savior Jesus that's referenced in these biblical texts, or is it because their mind is so, maybe if they believed it was somebody else and they used that different name or archetype, like ISIS as an example, ISIS save me.
Yeah.
That it would do the same thing. Your thoughts?
It's a fascinating question, and I've had people tell me the same thing. There have been other people that have told me they made it worse. Like there's one case where, and this is where I struggle with. It's what I struggle with, honestly. I'm conflicted. But this individual was abducted, and he didn't remember it until later on in his life. But he was abducted along with his grandmother, and what he did consciously remember was very little compared to what actually occurred. So it's the iceberg effect. And so what he consciously remembered was waking up. He was staying the night with his grandmother at the time. He was like maybe 8 or 9 years old, and while they're asleep, they hear a man's disembodied voice start talking to them. It's called a direct voice phenomenon. Starts talking to them. And so this man's testimony was that his grandmother got up, rebuked it. The Lord rebuke you. And so he went to bed crying the next morning. He asked her, what was that? She said, that was the devil, but don't worry about it. Right? I took care of it. I rebuked it. He said, okay, all right, fine. So later on in his life, he started having panic attacks and PTSD symptoms, goes into, what's it called? It's
hypnotic regression.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, hypnotic regression, memory regression. Anyways, and during one of these sessions, it just all comes bubbling up. And so he says, well, there was a lot more to that night than I originally thought. Well, what happened? That entity that was in the room actually took my grandmother. And he goes through a series of stages, and each one of them worse than the other. And finally, at the very end of it, they're trying to attack him. One of the entities was, and trying to attack him and trying to with the grandmother. It's very weird. And so she stands in between the entity and the child and says, listen,
Now, this is a very intense interview, and it gets a lot more intense. That's why we've got part 2 over on our Patreon page, because we talk about some... Well, anyway, just jump on over to Patreon because we can talk about it over there, and hit the subscribe button here on YouTube. Hit the bell for all notifications. Make sure you check back daily because we upload content pretty much every single day, and for whatever reason, sometimes people don't get the notifications. So just check back daily, make it a part of your daily routine. Thank you, Nathaniel, for being a guest here on the program. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Hit that thumbs up. Leave a comment in the comment section, hit the share button, and be the change you want to see. We'll see you on Patreon.